Good afternoon, everybody. They weren't kidding, the stage is kind of creaky up here. My name's Jeremy Shields. I'm with Kemin. I've been with Kemin for 11 years now. Did the first 8.5 on the beef and dairy side, and then transferred over to what we call the equine and specialty side about 2.5 years ago. This will be my second DAC day, so I appreciate them having me out again and getting to talk to y'all. Mine's going to be a little different. I had a PowerPoint. I used it in the first room. Projector wasn't working in the second, and so that seemed to go pretty good, so we're going to skip it this time too. So I've been tasked with talking to you about the art of storytelling. When I think of storytelling, you think of just how do you relate to people, I think is the biggest thing. And so how I've started out in the others is, how many of you have problems every day? All the time, right? And they can be a varying variety of problems that you can fix, problems you can't fix. So one of the stories that I like to tell, I call it a story. Some people say it's a parable, but I kind of put my own spin on it. But I want you to imagine there's this guy who he really needs a job. He had lost his job, was hurting really bad, needed a new job. So he applied to be a farmhand for this local farmer and got hired, and he was really excited, and he gets up the next morning to go to his first day at work, and his pickup won't start. So he's really disappointed, but he finally gets his pickup started, and he goes to work, gets there an hour late. But the farmer, you know, he's just really appreciative he's there. It's not a big deal, don't worry about it. And they go to work. Shortly after being there, one of the pivots goes down. And they go over and they start working on this pivot, and they work on it for several hours, and they can't get it fixed. And he's like, well, I tell you what, I'll keep working on this. Why don't you go get on the tractor and plow this field? And he's like, all right. So he goes over and he starts plowing this field, and lo and behold, the tractor breaks down. So these problems just keep piling up. Well, a farmer comes and talks to him. He said, you know, the day is almost gone. It's kind of been a bad day. I tell you what, I really want you to be around for a while. And if you're going to be around, you need to know my family. So why don't I take you to the house? I'll introduce you to the family. We'll have dinner, and then I'll take you home. He says, okay. So they drive to the house, and they get to the house, and they pull up to the farmer's house, and it's this beautiful property, beautiful house. And in front of this house is a big oak tree. And they get out, and as they're walking up, that farmer stops, and he puts his hand on this oak tree and just stands there for a minute. The guy doesn't think a whole lot about it. Then they go inside, and they have dinner, and really nice, enjoyable evening, and the guy's kind of excited about working again. And as they're leaving, he thanks everybody for being so accommodating and taking care of him, and how nice it was to meet everybody. And they get in the farmer's pickup to go home. And on the drive home, the guy asked the farmer, he said, you know, I noticed that you stopped at that oak tree when you got home, and there was a real wore out spot on it, and you put your hand on it there for a second. I just got to know what that's about. The farmer said, well, he said, you know, just like today, we had a lot of problems, a lot of things go wrong. And he said, when I come home, I don't want to bring those problems home to my family, because a lot of those problems don't have anything to do with my family, and they can't fix them. So when I come home every evening, I put my hand on that tree, and I leave all my problems on that tree. And then when I go to work the next morning, I pick them back up. He said, but one of the things I've learned is every morning when I go out to that tree to pick up my problems, there's not near as many problems as there was the day before. So that's just a little story on how people deal with things and try to relate with people when they're having a bad day and problems going. And I think it's an example of somebody that really saw a guy struggling, helped him out. But to me, that's what storytelling is. I don't know that there's a true science behind it. I think the benefit to storytelling in the industry that we're in, with you talking to customers, the true value of it comes from you truly knowing that customer and building a relationship with them. And in having that relationship and knowing that customer, it's easy for you to tell a story to help relate that product or whatever the problem solution that you're giving to. Because if you know them and you know them very well, then you're able to kind of put a story together that really resonates with that person to their particular problem. Easy ways to relate those. I know we've talked, most people have families and kids. It's really easy to relate those things. But just finding those common occurrences. I'm going to give a couple of examples of some that I tell when talking about products. The first one's going to be GI Pro 3. That's a product you've heard quite a bit about today. When we talk about GI Pro 3, it actually has 3 modes of actions. The first of those is that it lyses the cell and kills Clostridia. That one's pretty straightforward. The second is it produces a surfactant that acts like a low dose, or produces a surfactant that acts like an NSAID, so almost like giving them a low dose aspirin. That one's pretty relatable and easy to understand. The third one is quorum quenching and quorum sensing. So when I hear those phrases, I already get buggered up because that sounds like it's way over my head. So to explain quorum quenching and quorum sensing to people, I put it like this. I want you to think of the gastrointestinal tract as a college campus. There's students and people all over this campus. Just like the GI tract, there's bugs and all kinds of things in there. And inherently, they're not causing any problems, but they're all there. So when you think of bad bugs, I want you to think of fraternity brothers. Okay, so inherently, when they're on campus and going to class, they're not causing any problems, right? They're just like anybody else. So that's quorum sensing. Now, the other side of quorum sensing is that the problem lies when those fraternity brothers start communicating. They start texting back and forth and making calls, and they plan that party. That's when the things go bad. That's quorum sensing. Quorum quenching is the blocking of that communication. So GI Pro 3 produces a surfactant that blocks that communication. We block their cell phones. There's no texting. There's no Facebook. There's no calls. So they keep going to class, and there's no problems. So that's one of the examples of how I would use storytelling and relating that information on a subject. The other one I talked about is chromium, which is a product we've talked about today. Chromium, the easiest way to relate it is with diabetes. Pretty much everyone knows somebody who has diabetes or knows quite a bit about it. The type of diabetes that I'll talk about today is your typical type 2 insulin resistant, not the genetic where our pancreas isn't creating insulin, because we can't fix that. But when we talk in terms of insulin resistance, as far as diabetes and insulin resistance goes, of course, if you're consuming food, whether it be human or animal, they're consuming carbohydrates, starches, sugars, those type of things, and we consume too many of those, we become insulin resistant because the insulin isn't able to accommodate all the glucose that produces. So when in regards to chromium, where that comes in is chromium plays a role in that process where chromium attaches to the bottom of the insulin receptor. And when chromium attaches to the bottom of that insulin receptor, it magnetizes that insulin receptor, which allows insulin to attach to the top of it. Then once that happens, it acts like a key in a lock and signals for glucose transporters that didn't be pulled up to the cell wall to pull the glucose through into the body to be utilized as energy. And we've learned that a maximum of 4 chromium molecules can attach to the bottom of an insulin receptor. And when that happens, it can lead up to an 8-fold increase in glucose transporter activation. So we're allowing that much more glucose to be utilized as energy. So that one's not near as simple as but I think anytime you can take a subject and relate it to something that's common with people and that they know and understand, it makes it a lot easier. Because just like you, I don't have a PhD at the end of my name or a doctor in front of it. I find myself in my role, I do end up speaking to a lot of individuals who are like that are much higher educated than I am. Some of the talks that I have with them and presenting data and stuff are a lot different conversations than I have when I'm talking to an end producer, much like y'all would do, which I'm much more comfortable in those. But that's really all I have. Does anybody have any questions? I know in the other rooms we've had some questions on some of the products, or I don't know if you have any questions on storytelling or.
I think a big one is just the storytelling part in general, because all of us in here have fed a DAC product probably at some point, and you have that story of how it worked for you, or the neighbor fed it and they tell that story and how it worked for them. And I think the story part can be a very easy transition, which turns into a sale without even having to truly dig into that product knowledge. And I'm the first person to say that if you listen to me do a meeting, I 9 times out of 10 will talk about how we fed it. Tell that story, how Jeremy is talking here. And if you ask my father how he grew the brand of the company for the last 19 years, how many of you guys have heard my father at a meeting, do a DAC meeting before? I raise the hands of multiple of you, I'm sure. He tells his story of how he fed it. He's not going to sit up there like Steve and Tanya and dig into that. And I think it's a lot easier to just relate, though, when you can tell that personal story of how that product fit your need and fixed your horse.
Absolutely.
And people will remember the story. They may not remember the details, but they'll remember the story and get the general consensus out of it.
Absolutely. So if you watch a movie at home versus looking at a PowerPoint and somebody up here talking all day, you're probably going to remember quite a bit of that movie, but you're not going to remember a whole lot of that PowerPoint, right? The movie was more interesting. So I think anytime you can relate to those type of things. Another example we've talked about, when we were talking with the DAC team yesterday, I know one of the good examples they're utilizing, one of the salesmen was using before and after pictures when he works with customers, and he gets all his customers to send them before and after pictures. So that's another great tool when you're trying to sell that to somebody else, when you have that ability to show them before and after pictures and they can see it for themselves. Another benefit to this side of the industry is that you can share those stories of, I have this customer here who was having this problem. This is what we did. This is how it fixed it. I think it'll work for you. I can tell you in previous experience, for example, on the feed yard or dairy side, that's not as easily done because it's very ultra competitive, and that feed yard manager doesn't want that feed yard manager knowing what he's doing, or that dairyman doesn't want that dairyman to know what he's doing. So that's a little different conversation. But I think take advantage of the opportunity you have there to be able to share those stories and to be able to relate that.
Jeremy, I think we got an opportunity on Chromium. You talked a little bit about kind of how it works. What are we going to see when we add Chromium to the horse's diet? What's something we would say, hey, this customer, if you feed this, here's maybe what you're going to see.
So as far as see physically, not necessarily a ton. As we think about chromium across multiple species, in cattle, obviously we have a lot of data that shows carcass gain, we're adding muscle. But as far as like the horses are gonna go, you really gotta think about like Cushing's, metabolic disease, things like that. Another very positive thing to chromium is the repro data behind chromium. There's a lot of information out there about how it improves reproduction, reduces days to gestation and things like that. I don't know where else you want to go with that, but.
I think one that I kind of push a little bit, we're coming in summer here, is the
Yep, heat stress, absolutely.
I think that's a big one. The more comfortable we can keep those animals, I think the more we get what we want out of them, whether it's performance, whether it's reproduction, whatever it is, the more comfortable they are, the more we get what we want.
Absolutely. Chromium is kind of a tricky one in that sense because even though we've ran a lot of trials and we have a lot of data behind it, when I talk to customers, like he was saying, you have to think of chromium, and I'll tell you that Kemin did a really bad job when we launched chromium as far as chromium does some very neat things, but we pushed it as almost like a fix-it, this magic bullet type thing where at the end of the day, it is an essential trace mineral. And so when you think of trace minerals, we're not seeing these huge gains and things like that. The important thing to remember about chromium is that mode of action that I explained and what chromium does, it does it all the time. However, it is always going to get that glucose through to the body to be utilized as energy. That animal, though, is going to decide what that energy is used for, and that's used through a hierarchical manner. So it'd be nice if we got to dictate where it was used, but we don't. So whether that's the important thing with chromium is, if it's in young animals, it can be going through growth and health. If it's in, females in reproduction, it goes to their dairy cows. It can go to milk depending on where they're at. Feed yard cattle, it can go to health. It can go to growth. It can go to muscle at the end. Got some data on marbling. So it does a lot of different things. The thing to remember is it always does what it does and it's always working. You just don't always get to see what it's doing or working. And I know, for example, on the chromium, I had a feed yard customer, very early adopter, fed it early, loved it, fed it for 4 years, and then all of a sudden he's like, I'm not seeing what I used to see. Like, I'm looking at data and I'm not seeing an improvement year over year. Well, you're not going to see an improvement year over year if you've been feeding it that long. You have to look back at the day before, the data before you started it to compare it to, not the year over year. And then he's like, oh, that makes sense. And then we were back on. But it's easy for people to kind of get lost in the little things like that you don't think of. So that's another thing. If you lose a customer on something, don't be afraid to ask and find out what's going on and kind of problem solve and troubleshoot that to keep going after them and get it back.